Okay, 10% of your grade, and I really want to emphasize this, 10% of your grade, and that's the difference in letter grades, just to be clear, is peer review. So we do take this very, very seriously. This is part of your writing process, submitting your portfolio or your projects to one another and giving one another feedback. Peer review is so vital to participation in this course and to success in this course and into what we're trying to do, that if you don't participate in or participate fully in peer review, it will hurt you in your peer review grade. It will also hurt you in your participation grade because, as you can see, 15%, so basically you get credit every week, comes from just doing the work for the course. If you were in a seated course, this would mean showing up to class and participating in discussion, doing the work that's assigned, just being here. Okay, this doesn't just mean logging into Blackboard. It means actually doing the work of the course. That'll be 15% of your grade, and it'll always be clear what you need to do. 15% will also come from your critical reading journal. Sometimes this will be a critical writing analysis journal. That you submit to me once a week, and there's more information about that later down the page this week in the weekly units and also during our Blackboard walkthrough. And then 10% of your grade, the same amount as peer review. So I want to emphasize that again. You get just as much credit for turning in your paper to your peers and critiquing one another as you do to turning it in to me for my feedback. 10% of your grade comes from turning in those drafts to me and then getting feedback back. Okay, you have an example of the grading scale there. And actually, right now, I want you to scroll down past coursework for just a second down to the essay drafts grade breakdown. Since we're talking about grading, take a look here. This gives you a layout of the advisory grade that I'll give you on each of those projects as you submit them to me. For the most part, on all of the rest of the pre-portfolio credit that you get, like you get your participation point, you get your peer review credit, the question is, did you do that fully? Did you do that portion of this week's work fully? If you did, you get the full point. If you didn't, if you do it halfway, you get half a point. That kind of logic. With the drafts, you'll get a full point for turning in a complete draft to me for my feedback. But you'll also get a lot of feedback from me, and I do give a lot of feedback on papers. Don't let it overwhelm you. We'll talk about that again as we get our first drafts back. But you'll either get a late draft mark on it, a middle draft, or an early draft. If it's essentially what that is telling you where it is in the process of being ready to be published or finally graded. If I tell you this is a late draft, that means there's just a very, very little surface things that you need to work on before this is an acceptable document for an academic class. So essentially that would be the A to B range, or B plus range, I should say, A to B plus range of paper. If you get a late draft on a draft that you submit to me for my feedback, that's wonderful. I don't give those out very often. So if that happens to you, kudos. If it doesn't happen to you, don't sweat it. We expect that there's going to be work to do. That's part of the process. Most drafts that I get, and this is true of most papers that are turned in generally in college, fall in the middle draft range. That's the B to C range. It means you've done an adequate job, but there's a lot more that you can do with this paper, and I'm going to give you lots of feedback about how to get there. Early draft, this is C- and below. So what this means, early draft, is either there are a lot of things, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done, or it could also mean there's one thing and it's not going to take you that long to fix, but it's an essential element and it's missing, which means I can't give this paper a passing grade. So a really good example here is if you don't cite your sources. If you write me a very persuasive, rhetorically effective presentation of research, but you don't give me MLA citations of that research, then that would have to be a failing paper, because technically it would be plagiarism. We'll talk about that more as we get to it, but that would be a relatively easy thing to fix. It's easier to avoid it, though, in the first place. Okay, so that's kind of how the system of grading works. So if you want to scroll up again, you can see a more thorough description of the coursework that I just kind of raced through describing to you just above that in the coursework section. And I'm going to encourage you to read that rather than go through it here in the video. But all of that, all of those expectations should be clearly defined. If you have questions about how it works, please don't hesitate to email me. That's what I'm here for. Okay, grading criteria. I just talked you through it, but please do read that in case there's anything that I neglected to mention. It should all be here in the syllabus. When you get your portfolio, one thing that I will say, if you scroll back up, those project drafts, since Project 4 is our main assignment, you'll notice it's worth 4 points when you turn it in to me. For my feedback, all the rest are worth 1. Now on the portfolio, you get a breakdown of what the point totals will be so that you know exactly what's going to happen. If you don't submit a first draft of a project for my feedback, please notice that it will ding you again on your portfolio. Okay, you need to be keeping drafts of your papers. And that's a good thing to make a point of right now. You will, since you're submitting projects to me via Blackboard, you will have copies of your original drafts. But as you revise and work on your papers, please keep the original drafts and please pay attention to the changes that you make. You might even want to turn on track changes if you're using Microsoft Word. And as we get closer to the time, if you need help figuring out how to do that and you can't Google the answer, please contact me and I will let you know. You're going to want to keep track of the revisions that you make because in the portfolio, you're going to either highlight the changes that you make or make comments about what you did so that it's easier for me to see how your process was changed as you go. Okay, so please, please, please read through all of these requirements on the portfolio. I think most of the rest of the grade breakdown is fairly straightforward. If you have questions, please read through these carefully and please let me know. The late work policy, I hinted at this before, but because this class meets online and because I will be opening up the folders, you've already got a list of the weeks that things are due, and we're going to be working in the same system every week. And before we get to the coming weeks, I will have posted all of the materials for the semester. Since this class meets online, essentially, I can't accept late work. You always know what's coming. It's your responsibility to, as it says here, ensure you can reliably meet the expectations of the course. Technical difficulties can't be an excuse for late work in this course because we rely on technology. So, I get it that emergencies take place. I get it that unforeseen events happen. I get it that sometimes you might be working on a computer that relies exclusively on an AC adapter because the battery is shot and you knocked the cord off and lost all of your work. I get it that sometimes that happens. Not that that's ever happened to me. But you've got to be in contact. Communicating with me is the key to all of this. I will work with you as much as I can. But if I don't hear from you and your work is late, I can't help you. Okay.